Welcome to MACC Talk, a Middle Tennessee podcast from Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center in Hendersonville, Tennessee. I'm Celeste Davidson, the Development Director here at the MACC. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Brower Material Handling Systems, proven experts in supply chain efficiency.
Thank you, Celeste, and welcome everyone to MACC Talk. I'm your host, John Pitcher. We like to think of the MACC as a cultural town square where we encourage everyone to be their creative best. So, Celeste, I know you're always doing all sorts of different creative things. What have you been doing this week? And I bet you it has something to do with Moonlight and Magnolias.
Well, yes, John. I'm always creatively trying to raise money for our nonprofit here at the MACC, for our outreach and our healing arts. But specifically, we're working on our yearly annual fundraiser, Moonlight and Magnolias. We're trying to come up with some creative ideas to entertain people and get them drawn in so they really understand how important the work we do here is, and that they invest in us, invest their time and their energy and, of course, their resources so we can continue doing this great work here at the MACC.
Yeah. Well, of course, we've got some different things going on. Our Moonlight and Magnolias, for those of you who are just tuning in, is our annual Black Tie Gala fundraiser. We use the funds raised from that to support our healing arts program, our arts outreach, our exhibits, our arts education, just all the good things that we do here. We're going to be doing some things a little differently this year. We're actually not holding the gala right here at Mont Haven. Tell us about that.
So we started a couple years ago. We have such a great time, and people actually travel to come here. We have such great supporters that we extended our gala to a sort of weekend of events per se. So we start on a Thursday, go to Saturday, and then to Sunday with events. And this year we'll be doing our Thursday night here at the museum, all things about our artists, and that is Scott Jacobs this year, our featured artist. So we'll focus on his exhibit. We'll have a great time, music, food, all the good stuff. And of course, an amazing auction filled with art and experiences that are this great group of volunteers, the Magnolias and Mavericks, have put together. And that's how we'll have fun and we'll raise money.
He is, Scott Jacobs is an amazing photorealist. He's the official artist for Harley Davidson, and you would not believe the extraordinary quality of his work. Well, we are doing one thing certainly differently. We're going to have the gala over at the Noah Liff Opera Center, which is in Nashville. But before that, we have our big Rock and Revel auction party that you were talking about. And our guest today actually has some relation to that. She is, and her husband Al are co-chairing it, is Deanne and Al DeWitt. Our guest, of course, is Deanne. Deanne is the president of the Preservation Foundation of Sumner County. Her organization has been instrumental in raising community awareness about the importance of old places here in Sumner County. One of those places is our historic Comer Barn, which is now receiving a new lease on life, thanks in part to her efforts. We're excited to have Deanne on our show. Deanne, welcome to MACC Talk.
Thank you for having me, John.
You are so welcome. Well, let's just get started with the basic question. What is the Preservation Foundation of Sumner County?
It's a long title.
It is, but it's a good title. It tells us a lot.
It's meant to be an impressive title for a cause that is beyond the motivating project. So the Preservation Foundation was incorporated back in 2020. I was a county commissioner at the time, and the county owned this old stone barn, and it became a bit of a bugger of a problem. And I knew there was a solution, but I also knew that our county has so many iconic, historic, beautiful assets that setting up some kind of nonprofit just to save this sweet old stone Comer Barn, is a smaller vision than what our community deserved. So That's why we got the long title, the Preservation Foundation of Sumner County, a mission to connect hearts to the stories and places that make our community unique. Mm-hmm. And the Comer Barn is certainly one of them. So
it is. And I want to go into a little bit more about the Comer Barn in a minute, but let me ask you, you have, as I understand it, an engineering degree.
I do.
So how does an engineer suddenly become a sort of a preservation historian?
Oh, it's funny. I just recently heard this title. I don't think I've mentioned it to you previously. I am truly an accidental preservationist.
Okay.
And I think that's like a formal title, capital A, accidental preservationist, formal title. I should put it on my business card because you're right. An engineer that moved here, it's going on 15 years ago, but I'm not from this community, but my heartstrings are really connected to this community. And that engineering background, I grew up in Chicago, went to University of Illinois, didn't know what I wanted to do then, much like now. I'm always just looking for the next passion project to get involved in, but I had enough, math and engineering or sciences in my wheelhouse. So the engineering degree was a great degree to allow me to do a little bit of everything.
What kind of engineering degree do you have, by the way?
Oh, well, that was a great interview question at the time because my degree was called general engineering, which just meant that I could sit down in an interview and spend half the time in an interview trying to explain what general engineering was because it's not exactly a common degree, but it was a little bit of everything. I had to take electrical engineering and thermodynamics and fluid mechanics and double E lab. I mean, it was a pretty grueling curriculum, but I also had a minor in business. And ultimately, I was actually president of our alumni board when we merged, kind of acquired the industrial engineering department. So it's now under the title industrial and systems engineering, which maybe makes a little more sense to those that are engineers and know what engineering degrees are. But yeah, that was my background. I was a general engineer that spent 15 years working for IBM, and I was the ultimate generalist. I kept having bosses that said, Deanne, you need to pick a major.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why do you think I have a general engineering degree? I don't like picking majors.
So when you walk into a place like the Comer Barn as an engineer, does that inform what you're seeing in any way?
It helps, I think I have developed such a broad skill set and toolkit for whatever the problem-solving situation I stumble into. And so with the barn, talking with architectural engineers and architects and construction and folks who work with restoration efforts, I could certainly have a really detailed conversation. And I understood what the issues were. I understood what some of the challenges were and some of the professional services that needed to be involved in coming up with a solution. So I would say I gravitated towards that project because it was a problem that needed solving, which is part of my engineering background.
Right.
But then I would just have enough skills to be able to carry on a conversation intelligently.
Well, let's go a little bit more into detail about the Comer Barn. And people may be wondering why a place like MACC Talk is talking about a barn. And actually, there's one very, very good reason. Monhaven itself and the Comer Barn have a connection.
I know. Isn't that cool?
Isn't it really? It's kind of interesting. The barn is located maybe 5 miles from where we're
straight down
sitting.
the road. Pretty much.
But Monhaven, this house, was purchased in the 1930s by a businessman at Washington Manufacturing in Nashville. If you're wondering what Washington Manufacturing was, they were the guys who made the uniforms for the troops in World War II. So that was a really monster company.
Huge.
Back in the day. Mont was, I think, the vice president of the company. Like so many really super successful Nashville businessmen, they like to come out to the lake, to this area here in Sumner County. It's just a sort of a getaway place. So he purchased this old house and did a lot of renovation with it. And he loved it. And he loved it so much that his family started calling it Mont's Haven because it was just his getaway. And this was in the 1930s. And around that time, Guy Comer came out and created his barn.
Fell in love with the community the same way.
He liked it too, and it was I believe at one time the barn was called something different, wasn't it? Wasn't it Wilson Farms?
Well, if you could see the front door, that's still there, and that's going to be restored. I don't know if they're going to actually restore it with this name, but he engraved the front door of the Comer Barn as Wilson Farms.
Okay.
So he always thought of it as Wilson Farms, the whole property. I think he bought 350 acres or so from the Wilson family. So Guy Comer had that property and had a bigger vision for it, I think, in terms of just the agricultural and different purposes. But he always thought of it as Wilson Farms.
Wow. Well, tell us a little bit more about the barn and how you got involved with it.
Okay. Well, it was... I think it was 2019. It's 2019. I'd been elected as a county commissioner in 2018, and this nagging challenge and problem of the barn, and what are we going to do with it? The Rogers Group, the quarry that owns the property and is doing the work now, they had given the barn to the county thinking, our job is not historic preservation. We make big rocks into little rocks and we pave roads, and that's what we do, but we don't do historic preservation, nor do we have reason to own an old barn. So they'd given it to the county.
Now, they could have just leveled it, right? I mean, they own
everything.
Absolutely.
It could have been willful neglect. They could have leveled it. It's,
And they have heavy machinery. They could have just taken that thing out in a day. If they wanted to.
If they were smart, right?
Yeah, or a night.
When nobody was looking.
Well, it's an interesting, you drive up and down the Johnny Cash Parkway, the Gallatin Parkway, you see this barn over in a big field, and it's very beautiful, but also extremely run down.
Right.
So for whatever reason, the old timers here have just loved this barn because it's a landmark.
Totally. It had horses in there as recently as right around 2000. Might have been like 1999, 2000, 2001, and that time frame is the last time that people were boarding their horses at the barn. So it was an active barn, but then the property was sold to Rogers Group in and around that time frame. So when 2019, when I'm kind of looking at this issue and thinking, okay, there needs to be a solution. There's got to be a way we can come up with a good source of funding, a good way to put this barn back, to restore it and bring life back to the property. And I was sitting with my friend Bill Pereira, who, of course, your executive director, Cheryl Strichick, and I both had a very sweet and dear relationship with Bill Pereira. And Bill introduced us shortly after this conversation he and I had, and he just happened to be showing me this video. It was I think it was filmed in right around 1941 or so. And there was all this footage of Gallatin, the square. They had done this promotional video about Gallatin. So it had the square and the Palace Theater and the old courthouse and the Gallatin cheerleaders. And then the barn, is in the middle of this neat old black and white video and that he was showing me. And I said, Bill, that's the barn. What are we going to do about it? And he said, I don't know. It's a mess. But, if somebody can figure it out, Deanne, you can. And those words echoed through my head.
So now you're challenged.
All the way until something got done. And so, yes, it felt like I had a charge from a friend who is the ultimate seed sower and the sage of Sumner County. I know Cheryl's used that term for him. He had such, what a dear friend and what a great mentor he was to me. So to honor him and that charge, it wasn't something I was going to give up on, which I don't tend to give up on things.
We're speaking with Deanne DeWitt about the Preservation Foundation of Sumner County and about why old places matter. We'll be back after this important message.
Brower asks you to imagine a classroom with no color, no music, no movement. Imagine a child who never discovers their passion for painting or the confidence they find on stage. We can't afford to let creativity disappear. Yet arts programs continue to be underfunded or eliminated altogether. For information on art classes at the MACC, visit monthavenarts.org. Support arts education. Advocate for programs that inspire imagination, expression, and growth. Because every child deserves the chance to dream and the tools to bring those dreams to life. Art is not a luxury. It's a lifeline. This message brought to you by Brower Materials Handling, service you can trust and parts we can provide. BrowerOnline.com.
We're back with Deanne DeWitt, president of the Preservation Foundation of Sumner County. Bill Pereira was one of those few people I've met in life who actually probably does deserve the moniker of Renaissance man. Because, we think of him in many different ways because he was so broadly accomplished, but he started out as an accountant, and he was a businessman and a number cruncher and a paper pusher and a very, very successful one.
Very astute. He and I both started our careers at Price Waterhouse.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely.
And so he was actually instrumental in creating the Memorial Foundation here in Sumner County. And of course, he was, sort of the really seen as a founding father of that organization. And that's one of Nashville's great blue chip foundations that does incredible charitable work.
Yeah.
But
Bill actually created the call to action and the funding to build the Memorial Hospital. Mm-hmm. And then when it was time for that hospital to get sold, he absolutely led the stewardship of selling that and using the funding from the sale of the hospital to create the Memorial Foundation.
This amazing foundation. Yeah. But of course, at the same time, he was a man of many interests. He was actually a very, very accomplished painter and artist, and he would create these art history books, because he loved Sumner County. Yes. He was a Sumner County guy. And so he was really a published expert on our local history. He was an amazing painter of a lot of our local history. So you could see somebody like that. I believe he has done some art of the Comer Barn. He's someone who would be a real official voice in explaining.
Yeah,
that.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's actually we did when we incorporated, one of the ways Bill wanted to help make sure that, he did everything he could to help us get off the ground. He did paint the barn, mm-hmm. and then he gave us all the rights to reproducing that image.
Right. And there's a giclée now, right?
There are giclées.
Okay.
We have them printed in 2 sizes, and we've sold several of them, and of course posthumously he won't be able to sign them for good reason at this point, but we're going to relaunch sales of those to celebrate the renovation and the restoration of the barn. So yeah, that news is coming soon.
An excellent idea. Well, you had a speaker here last year, Thompson Mays. And we actually had him on this program. He's a fascinating man. And I have to pose to you the same question I posed to him. He wrote a book, Why Old Places Matter. Why do old places like Comer Barn matter?
Well, there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Well, for me, old places matter because they create the sense of place that we live in and we love. And we don't even know why we love the place we live sometimes. But when you are surrounded by these places, these old places that have character and history beyond anything new, they create this very intangible but meaningful sense of place and identity. And I think that we feel connected to that sense of place. And without them, we start to lose that identity. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of reasons that Thompson would go into that all made so much sense. And I love his book, Why Old Places Matter. That book it's beautiful, and it's just intriguing. And I think he touches on these reasons that are maybe visual, and so maybe they relate to your heart or to your mind or to your soul. And there's a myriad of reasons that fit into each of those different categories. Mm-hmm. But when you stop and take inventory of it, it's all very personal. So everybody has a different answer to that question. And I think that was a really fun part of him being here and presenting on that topic, and then creating the dialogue in our community of why do old places matter? And I'll be totally honest, when I got involved in the Comer Barn project, I was looking at it very much from the economic impact. I feel that the Comer Barn is at such a pivotal intersection in the middle of our community that if we were to allow something like that to go away, we were just cutting ourselves off at the knees for the future of this community that is going to be made so much richer by that property continuing to thrive and exist. To attract businesses, to attract residents and people that want to be here and live here and have fun here. That having that sense of place to me is such an important investment in the future. It's more important to me that the future generations have that same sense of place. But I know that with that comes the investment in this community. So to me, a lot of it was about the economics.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that these old places and their importance to us can be so controversial sometimes. You're always going to run into, for everybody who wants to save the Comer Barn, you're going to find somebody who's like, I can't believe you'd want to spend our taxpayer dollars on a Comer Barn when you could do it on whatever, I don't know.
Right. That's it does. I feel like it's a very circuitous bit of logic that says, we want to slow down the growth. We don't want people to, we don't want to just keep building homes and apartments, and we want to preserve things. but we don't want to preserve that old barn because
Right.
that's going to cost money. And I think most people don't realize that some level of government funding is involved in a lot of things that you don't think about, right? You think about roads and schools and jails and some of those things that you absolutely have to fund. But most any historic structure has had some level of government taxpayer funding involved, whether they're state-owned or city-owned or county-owned. And so it was a pretty logical path that we were on at one point to use some county funding and some state funding and some schools funding to restore that barn and use it for agricultural purposes and ag education. I think
Well, tell us a little bit about that, because I know that at one point you guys were looking at, when I say you guys, the county legislature was looking at different options for use, because Rogers Group gave you this barn.
Right.
So it's a historical structure.
Right.
Why don't you guys figure out what to do with it? I know that Monhaven had actually come up with a proposal for like a craft center, and it would work with students. And but I think that another option that I heard, I think the tourism people were interested in having a tourism center or something like that.
Event center, yeah.
And then you had an idea, or someone had an idea for using it with the high school, the Sumner County schools. Is that right?
Right.
Tell me a little bit about it. That struck me as like a genius idea. Tell me a little bit about that.
I think that was, it became a really win-win-win situation. It was going to preserve this old barn. It was going to tap into some funding that was readily available, certainly at that timing too. If we think back when this all was kind of going down, 2020, there was a lot of funding flowing into our state, into our school system for this kind of an investment. Like the timing was really perfect. And so we had a funding solution. We had a barn that was going to get saved. And the real plan was to build an ag and STEM learning center.
Which is a great idea. I know the Hendersonville High School has a great ag teacher.
Probably the best in the...
Steve Stevens.
Oh,
and he gets kids into the governor's school, because the governor's school has a program in that. So it's serious. It's a serious academic discipline, as well as an important part of our economy.
And I would say Hendersonville High School probably has the premier ag and FFA program at their high school. And out of our Sumner County, I think we have 9 high schools. I think 7 of them have ag CTE programs, career technical education. So they might have greenhouses, or they might have some kind of vet tech or other
and that
ag.
can feed into the University of Tennessee system, which they have great programming as well.
Absolutely, yeah. We had a lot of interested educational partners. Everyone from Vol State, Community College. We continue to get inquiries from UT about whether or not that will ever become available, and so there was a vision that you would have elementary kids come and maybe do field trips on the property. Middle school could maybe come out and do some kind of project. High schoolers could have, grown plants and vegetables and had farmers markets and sales. And so there was a lot of ways to use that property for the school population. My hope is that some level of integration now still with our schools at some level. There still be that opportunity. No guarantees.
Now that didn't happen though, right?
Right. I kind of fast forwarded, but yes, that plan and the original $3.5 million that was dedicated to that plan, where the quarry was going to transfer 42 acres to our school system. So all of that frontage, all that beautiful green space would have become permanent green space owned by our county school system.
Okay.
That did go away. In 2022, there was, it's an election year, and I think the new current commission just had a different set of priorities, and so that funding and that solution was dismissed.
Okay, so they wanted to get government out of everything. So did it go back to Rogers Group?
Right.
So they're like, okay, great. So what's the plan after that? Because I know that some developments have now happened, and I realized that when I started driving by the barn, I say, wait, this is looking different. I think it's getting a little bit of a makeover. So tell me what happened.
It's getting a great makeover. So since 22, there's been a lot of different efforts to bring different partners to the table to get the seed funding we needed to save the barn at a minimum, get a new roof on it, and preserve it. Ultimately, the rest of the story that, maybe isn't going to get a lot of prime time, but what happened last year is that we ended up finding a benefactor who really had a great vision for the property, and he had a great offer on the table that Rogers Group almost couldn't refuse. It was a great offer. It would have removed this project and problem from their ledger, and it could have been saved. I think ultimately what happened is Rogers Group, not only their executive team, but the ownership of the organization, they realized what that offer was and realized that offer really made a lot of sense. And so the culmination of that is that Rogers Group decided it was their opportunity to do something really meaningful for their own legacy, and putting the funding forward to restore the barn, to fully restore it. So if you drive by it today, you'll see today, I don't know exactly when this airs, but I would say for the next week even, there you'll see a black sheathing that's there where they've replaced all the decking of the roof, repaired all the necessary rafters, and so they're preparing to install a new roof. It's going to be a galvalume, which is a metal roof, much like what it would have been initially or originally part of that barn. So the green shingles that most people are kind of remember seeing most recently, the green shingles are gone, and then we're going to restore it to the look, its original look from 1940.
Wow.
I say we, Rogers Group. They get all the credit. They really have.
I wonder what is the moral to this story, because I could have seen this going in so many different ways over the last few years.
Well, the moral to the story. Well, I'd say perseverance pays off. So that's one of the morals, and keeping it a very active conversation in the community, and keeping awareness and drawing as much attention to that opportunity as possible was certainly worthwhile. And I do think that it's true that businesses that are here, they have a responsibility to the community as well. And Rogers Group has done a lot. A lot of people don't realize what they donate, whether it's schools or paving projects or loads of gravel, and they're always helping out nonprofits in our schools and our civic organizations. But they've really stepped up. And
yeah, I'm telling you. We're speaking with Deanne DeWitt about the Preservation Foundation of Sumner County and about why old places matter. We'll be back after this important message.
Brower reminds us that art is more than decoration. It's the heart of a thriving community. It tells our stories, connects our cultures, and brings people together across backgrounds and generations. Communities that invest in the arts see increased tourism, stronger local economies, and healthier, happier citizens. Art makes places more vibrant, more inviting, and more resilient. When we support the arts, we're not just creating beauty, we're building bridges and shaping a stronger future for everyone. Support local artists, attend local events, fund local art programs. Because when art thrives, we thrive. For more information on art classes at the MACC, visit monthavenarts.org. This message brought to you by Brower Materials Handling, service you can trust in parts we can provide. BrowerOnline.com.
We're back with Deanne DeWitt, president of the Preservation Foundation of Sumner County. Well, I have to imagine that maybe part of our moral here is also when you have a hopeless task, get Deanne DeWitt on the case, because you don't.
That's
really,
way too kind.
You don't give up.
Well, I do get passionate, and I do have a hard time refusing or turning away from a good idea.
Okay.
So,
well, what will the barn be used for at this point? Do we know, or is that still just sort of up in the air? They're going to fix it first, and then we'll figure it out. Yeah. What's going on?
Well, they'll fix it first, and then we'll figure it out. I know that as the renovation started late last year, I worked with their team to release a bit of a press release on the project. And I know there's a willingness to allow the community to access it, maybe for nonprofit events, let's say fundraisers. I did a couple barn raising music events on the property. So I foresee them allowing nonprofits to host some events out there. And I think they would love to see some ag education activities happening on the property. But that, we're going to get through this first major phase of restoring it before any of those things are committed.
Do you see any change in awareness in our community about these old places since you got started?
I would like to say yes. I'd say to say that, honestly, as an engineer, I might need to do a little more study. But I do think that well, I'll tell you this. One of the other things that I'm really proud of that has happened over the last couple of years, when we kind of hit that initial brick wall and the initial funding and Ag STEM Learning Center project went away, I knew there was more work to be done around historic sites. And so bringing Thompson Mays to help, again, bring the community together with an awareness building campaign. Why do old places matter? That was an effort of what is called the Sumner Preservation Collaborative. And that collaborative is what I launched in 2023. And that collaborative has met quarterly now for the last couple of years with representation from all of our historic sites, or most all of them. We have a lot. We have a lot in Sumner County. But most of all our historic sites are sitting at the table together once a quarter to talk about what their initiatives are, where they're going, what they need help with, sharing resources, sharing ideas. And it's built not just great friendships across the table, but it is, I think it has really elevated the programming and the opportunities to bring historic preservation into the forefront. So I think that there's a culmination of different efforts, but I do think that there's more and more opportunity and more awareness.
Yeah. Do you have a speaker this year?
We don't have a speaker this year. We're turning the focus towards a program that existed for, I think, 60, maybe 70 years, called the Pilgrimage of Homes. Okay. And so I don't know if you would have...
There was like a tour of that sort when Thompson was here last year, wasn't there? Wasn't there like an open house for some of these places?
The first Saturday of April every year, so April 5th this year, there's a historic sites kickoff. Okay. So all of the historic sites...
that is coming up imminently in a few hours.
In a few hours.
There you go. And we have you here, so thank you for coming.
So the historic sites kickoff happens once a year, but then the Pilgrimage of Homes was actually a day where not only the historic sites were open, but there was a ticketed entry to historic homes and some modern homes. So in the last time they did it, I think was 2017. And several historic homes were part of the pilgrimage. But then there were houses in, I think the Indian Lake Peninsula and Fairview were part of the tour as well. So it was a neat opportunity to kind of bring together that curiosity of, wanting to see inside of a private residence that is of interest. And so that program it just keeps coming back in different ways that people are looking for us to bring that back. So our focus now is trying to schedule a pilgrimage of homes to coincide with the historic sites opening next year.
I think that would be an amazing idea.
I'm looking for volunteers, so let's plug that just one more time. So if you want to see a pilgrimage of homes in April of 2026, we need to put together several committees to do the marketing and publicity and getting all the details sorted out. And I know there's probably a lot of people that listen to this MACC Talk.
It's close enough.
Podcast. I knew what I was trying to get to. But yeah, I'm sure there's folks that remember it. I never attended, so it was a little before my accidental preservationist stage.
I feel like I've seen it mentioned somewhere. So yeah, I think that would be an amazing thing to bring back. Well, what are some of the other gems that we have here in Sumner County? I guess I can say one of them is where we are right now.
It is, absolutely.
The Monhaven is a grand old house. The house we're in now, actually, I think this part is the extension that Mont and his family had built. The main house dates back to before the Civil War, and the property itself dates back to, I believe, 1783, if I'm not mistaken. That would have been right. That was the year that the Revolutionary War came to an end, and you had a lot of these soldiers out there who, need to be paid somehow. And, land was more valuable in those days than any currency. If you were in Virginia, which was my home state, the cash crop was tobacco. George Washington, when he was in the House of Burgesses, was paid in tobacco, not money. It was more valuable in those days. So this guy, his name was Henry Rules, of French ancestry, received 650 acres. I believe that's the number that's sticking in my head. That was, I think, for your regular soldier, the amount you got.
Wow. I didn't realize it could be.
It was about 650 acres. If you go to the the Douglas House over by
Long
Hollow. That was the same amount. 650 acres. If you go to Rock Castle, which is really quite a gem, that was 3,000 acres. So the Daniel Smith, who was the founder of Rock Castle, you might think he might have been a general, because I do believe general officers receive more than just enlisted as a payment. But he was actually as valuable in those days as a general. He was a surveyor.
Yeah.
And that's what they really needed back in those days.
And he was the cartographer that charted the state of Tennessee, right?
He was very important, and amazingly, that for that amount, he got paid quite nicely. And this was North Carolina at that point too. This was Davidson County, North Carolina. So those guys were really paving the way. But it's Rock Castle, Monhaven, these are two of the really great gems that people can see here. What other places, without sounding like there's any favoritism, which ones do you really get a kick out of?
Oh, I'm going to not answer that question. I'm going to first comment. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what you just said, because I do think, as I started working on the Comer Barn, one of the things that I learned early on, and I think is such a valuable mindset for historic preservation, is to look for opportunities for adaptive reuse. And so Monhaven is it's the ultimate adaptive reuse. You have this historic property that brings all the character and just the feels of an old place, and now you've got art and creativity and learning about art happening in this beautiful old historic structure, and that's really cool. And that was the plan with the barn, right? To do something agriculture related.
And Thompson and I had mentioned a little bit about that, about why old places matter. One thing is that they can inspire new things. And I did not mention, but Monhaven in 1862 was captured by the Union Army because we were close to the railroad lines, and the Union was fighting a railroad war, logistics war, which as an engineer, I'm sure you'd appreciate. And
this is prime property.
Yeah, and this was close to the Louisville-Nashville Railroad, so they captured this. It was close to Gallatin. And converted it into a field hospital. Yeah, treated both Union and Confederate troops. And so our director, Cheryl Strichick, had the inspiration some 150 years later. Well, why don't we turn it into a place that also does healing arts today? So you sort of inspired from that history. We now do something that is sort of transforms, that war and pain into something that's a little bit more therapeutic and creative and spiritual. So that's what we've tried to do. We're speaking with Deanne DeWitt about the Preservation Foundation of Sumner County and about why old places matter. We'll be back after this important message.
Brower asks you to imagine a classroom with no color, no music, no movement. Imagine a child who never discovers their passion for painting or the confidence they find on stage. We can't afford to let creativity disappear. Yet arts programs continue to be underfunded or eliminated altogether. For information on art classes at the MACC, visit monthavenarts.org. Support arts education. Advocate for programs that inspire imagination, expression, and growth. Because every child deserves the chance to dream and the tools to bring those dreams to life. Art is not a luxury. It's a lifeline. This message brought to you by Brower Materials Handling, service you can trust and parts we can provide. BrowerOnline.com.
We're back with Deanne DeWitt, president of the Preservation Foundation of Sumner County.
You've just said so many things that I want to pawn off and
Please
go
do.
from,
Please do.
because that what you do with healing arts here at Monhaven is, if there is one thing that people don't know about Monhaven, to me that's it. There is such a deep and impactful effort being made here to restore lives through the healing arts, and whether it's veterans or youth or anywhere in between that is struggling, there is such healing that comes from exploring your thoughts and feelings through art. And it's amazing what you do. And so anyways, I'm going to shift back to your other question about these other sites, because there's some neat parallels. You mentioned Rockcastle. You mentioned that Monthaven was, taken by the Union troops. Rosemont, that's in Gallatin, it's owned by the city of Gallatin. Rosemont was also taken hostage by the Union troops. And there's some really cool stories there, because they had a amazing thoroughbred farm. There were horses that were kept in the basement of Rosemont while the Union occupation was there. And the caretaker of those horses would bring the horses out at night so they could feed in the yard, and then bring them back to hide them in the basement. Like, how do you do that? I just can't even wrap my head around the ingenuity that would have happened to preserve something that was so dear to the family. The
sure.
Guild family.
Well, the occupying general there was a man, I believe his name was Eleazar Payne. Very, very aptly named. Had a reputation for using troops to commandeer things that would then go up north to his house.
And he did all sorts of other brutal things.
Yes, he did other brutal things too. But we actually, one of the descendants of the person who built this house before the Civil War, Leonard Fite, one of his descendants actually came back here and had the family Bible, and had a contemporaneous letter in there from, I think, Leonard Fite's wife about that particular general.
Wow.
And it was so interesting to hear a perspective from those days. It's like, I can't believe we're being so badly treated, given that we weren't really a secesh state. I mean, that was the politics of that time. So
very interesting. I got to see that letter.
Yeah.
Okay,
really
I'm gonna pick up on one of the other things you said and draw another parallel. Rockcastle, that's here in Hendersonville. I think it was in 2022, they received the state's largest ever allocation to a historic site. I think at that time it was $8 million. And maybe I've got the year or the exact amount wrong, but Rockcastle is getting a major facelift right now. There's going to be a beautiful new visitor center, and it's already just a phenomenal location when the symphony comes to perform here and when they host living history days for our elementary students. I mean, there's just such a vibrant collection of things that happens at Rockcastle. Well, what's interesting is Sumner County has more state-owned historic sites by far than any other county in Tennessee. And one of the other state-owned historic sites or collection of sites is historic Castellian Springs.
That's right.
So in Castellian Springs, you actually have 3 separate properties. You have Cragfont, you have Wynwood, which was a guest house and a traveler's rest, and there's all sorts of neat stories there as well. And then Hawthorne House. Again, lots of other cool stories about Hawthorne House, but Cragfont and their specific property, the year after Rockcastle got the largest ever allocation, Cragfont got the largest ever allocation for some renovations on their property. So there's a lot of investment in what's happening in our county's historic sites, because we're very blessed with that the number of different and the diversity, not just the number, but the diversity. You mentioned Douglas Clark House. Andrew Jackson was a judge and served as judge there at that house. And then there's, the story of him having a fist fight and tumbling down into the river next to the Douglas Clark House, which has never been proven. So I'm saying that, but there's some colorful history that
it might have been the only time he got knocked down too. What interesting facts. Well, here at Monthaven, of course, we're also now a art museum, and we have our student art show hanging up downstairs.
I know.
And that reminds me of an essay contest that you guys have with the Preservation.
Thanks for mentioning that.
Preservation Foundation. Tell me, I was excited when I saw that. Tell me a little bit about that and how that works.
Well, in our Wild Places Matter conversation, I said it's, to me, preserving these old places is most important for that next generation. If we allow these things to go away, we've taken away that sense of identity that next generation has to benefit from. And so as part of that mission to connect hearts to the stories that make this community so special, we felt that doing an essay contest just for high school seniors, so they've lived here long enough to be able to look around and take inventory. And we've had 3 years now of phenomenal essays that these students have written, and their observations have been inspiring. And so, that's been a really rewarding additional mission from our nonprofit.
Well, talk about a great way to create awareness, right?
Right.
So
right. You get into those communities where you spread the word, and it does. I think You're absolutely right.
Okay. Well, I don't want to keep you here all day, but I have to ask you a little bit about what you're doing for Monthaven in a few weeks. You and your husband,
Such an
Al,
honor. Yes.
are going to be chair of our Prelude party. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we have always found a way to be here for Moonlight and Magnolias. I think it is a great annual tradition. I wouldn't miss it. And it was certainly an honor to be asked to help host the Prelude party, or is that what you called it? The Prelude party, yes. And Rock and Revel, I mean, it's every year it's got a theme that just is the fun and the prelude to such an elegant evening on Saturday. So May 1st is the Rock and Revel this year, and May 3rd is the gala downtown. I'm so excited. I am embarrassed to admit that I've never been to the Opera House, but I know I'm in store for a treat, and it's definitely an honor. And I'll tell you, the Sunday afternoon or morning brunch with the artist is maybe my favorite part of these events.
That is a great part.
It's so personal, and it's its own really unique bit of inspiration and connection to what makes this place really sing.
Yeah. Well, Deanne, thank you for speaking with us today. I think you are the sort of asset that every community, every county needs to have. Everybody needs to have a Deanne DeWitt. And I know that we are a much better place because of you. So thank you so much for being here.
So gracious. Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to MACC Talk from Monthaven Arts and Cultural Center. Our mission is to educate, elevate, and encourage our community through the transformative power of the arts. If you're interested in transforming your creative life, check out our website at monthavenarts.org. Our guest today was Deanne DeWitt, President of the Preservation Foundation of Sumner County. Our podcast music was written by Nashville composer Christina Spinay. I'm Celeste Davidson. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.